Sports. The Sports Wrap with Jason Page starts now.
I'm not Jason Page. I'm Sam Yarnell, and I'm in for Jason as I am every Wednesday here on the Sports Wrap, live and in your ears. And we got a great Wednesday show coming up for you today. The first recurring guest in the history of the Wednesday edition of the Sports Wrap will make his second appearance in 2 weeks on the program. Beale from AM New York Sports is right around the corner to talk all things NBA after what was a pretty electric opening night. Two very close games, and I'm not sure I foresaw either of them being as close as they were. I thought the Nuggets were going to beat the Lakers by 40. We'll get into that with JJ here in just a couple of seconds. We'll also go through Major League Baseball, man. What a game we had last night. The Arizona Diamondbacks are going to the World Series. Like Jason said, if you had the Rangers and the Diamondbacks playing in the World Series before the season started, put your hand down. No, you didn't. No one did. But what a story it's been for this Diamondbacks team all year. And Bryce Harper choking in the clutch. The Phillies spending $700 million on an 0 for 11 to finish out the series. It's a tough look for Philadelphia baseball this morning. We'll get all into that. Also, lots of news out of the NFL. Jim Irsay continues to be a wild card. He did something that may have ramifications against his own organization in the coming weeks. We'll get into that and wrap it up with a big story out of the NHL that I think a lot of you are going to want to hear. But let's get into the NBA talk and bring in my close personal friend, AM New York sports reporter, JJ Beale. JJ, it was an opening night in the NBA. I don't know if there's a great adjective I could use to describe both of those games, but we'll start with the Lakers and the Nuggets. The Nuggets win it by 12. Anthony Davis, tough night for him. Nikola Jokic absolutely dominated him. What did you see in that game?
I saw the world champions doing what world champions do. I mean, it seemed like there was no championship hangover at all. It was more business as usual. Last year, Nikola Jokic shows up to the gym, he gets his triple-double, and he goes home and rides his horses. It was business as usual for these Nuggets.
Nuggets fans after the game, did you see this? They were chanting at the Lakers, "Who's your daddy?" Did you see that? My gosh. What is
Anthony Davis?
Go ahead.
Anthony Davis was talking trash in the preseason, so he wanted this. He was looking for this smoke, and he got all of it for sure.
So one of the 82 games that Anthony Davis says he's going to play in this season, and he didn't look great, like I alluded to earlier, but what does that mean for the expectations for the Lakers this season, if anything? I mean, they come out on opening night, and they've been talking, like you said, all offseason, and they just kind of get dominated. The Nuggets were there and showed exactly who they were, the champions from last season. Does it lower expectations for the Lakers?
I don't think so, because I don't think the expectations are that high to begin with. I mean, this is certainly a more competent and complete roster than they were last year. You saw guys like Gabe Vincent, Cam Reddish, Christian Wood all positively contribute off the bench. So you look at this Lakers team and you don't expect them to be the top tier in the West. Like, that's the Nuggets, the Warriors, the Suns. Like, those are elite teams. The Lakers simply aren't that team. Not yet, and maybe not this season. I don't see them being an elite team this season.
Do you mean they won't make the playoffs? They won't make the conference finals?
They'll make the playoffs and everything, but there's tiers in each conference. There's, you have the contenders in the Eastern Conference, you have the contenders in the Western Conference, and at the end of the day, I don't see this Lakers team being they could be a second round team for sure, but they're not going to be an Western Conference Finals team by any means.
So let's get into a contender now. In the other game, the nightcap last night, a much closer game, Suns 108, Warriors 104. Devin Booker looked great in this, 32, 6, and 8. Nurkic, how about Nurkic coming out in his first game with the Suns and posting a double-double? I don't know if anyone saw that coming. What did you make of the Suns, and are the Warriors still a title contender?
So we'll start with the Suns. The Suns, I love what I saw from the Suns last night. I mean, it was exactly what you're expecting. They don't have Bradley Beal out there yet because, as you know, former Wizards do run this league. But, you got positive contributions off the bench. That's the only question mark with this team, with the Suns team, is what they're going to get from the bench, because they have their top six guys. They have Booker, they have Durant, they have Nurkic, they have Beal. Like, they have those guys. Those guys are there. But what are they going to get from Utah Watanabe? What are they going to get from Drew Eubanks? Like, what are those guys going to contribute throughout the season? And are they going to contribute enough to keep this team a top 4 seed? Because I don't know how sustainable it is for Kevin Durant and Devin Booker to play 36 minutes a night before they break down.
And are they going to combine for 50 points every night? I don't think that that's necessarily reliable either. I'm totally with you there. Speaking of former Wizards who run this league, Chris Paul, man, in crunch time last night. I'm watching this game. I'm thinking the Warriors have two of the best shooters of the generation, if not of all time, on the floor at the same time, and a great facilitator to get them the ball. And what does Chris Paul do? Walks up and shoots a 3 from the logo. I don't understand what his role in this offense is.
Chris Paul is getting paid $30 million a year for every 3 that he takes in clutch time. That's not, and where Steph Curry and Klay Thompson are wide open, they should fine him $500,000. I'm not even kidding. I mean, it is basketball malpractice what he did last night. It's the old meme where it's like, it's Chris Paul time, says Chris Paul. Like, get out of here. Who do you think you are?
Is that your biggest takeaway from? I think that's probably my biggest takeaway from night one, is that Chris Paul may just run this Warriors team into the ground if he keeps doing that all year long. What was your biggest takeaway from night one?
My biggest takeaway is that the Suns team is for real. It's been a lot of talk. They haven't been able to stay healthy that much. So you haven't really seen what this team can do when they're fully healthy and at their full potential. And they still weren't at their full potential last night without Bradley Beal. But this Suns team is for real. They fly under the radar when you think about offseason moves and everything. But this is a team that's for real. And I'm really looking forward to, they'll be a fine regular season team. They're not going to try that hard because, as we've learned, the regular season doesn't really matter. As long as you get a top 4 seed, then you're fine in the Western Conference. But going into the playoffs, I'm already excited to see this team.
All right, let's move ahead. 2 things I want to get to with you before we get you out of here. Celtics Knicks tonight. Obviously, you being a New York reporter, you have to cover the Knicks, but being a diehard Celtics fan, what are your thoughts going into this game? Are the Celtics going to blow the Knicks out of the water in this one? I'll ask you again. I asked you last week, but this is just going to become a recurring theme on the show. Is Jalen Brunson him? What's your thoughts on tonight?
So if you want to read more about my thoughts for tonight, you can check out my preview on AM New York. I wrote a little preview for this game. Little shameless plug, but I think the Celtics are going to win tonight. I mean, the Knicks are going to be a very talented team this year. They're going to be one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. But this Celtics team, I mean, just looking at them in the preseason, they were clicking already on all cylinders. The 5-out offense with Porzingis really introduces a new depth to this team that they haven't had before. So now it puts the Knicks in a precarious position because you don't have Mitchell Robinson protecting the rim. You don't have Julius Randle parking himself in the paint. You force teams to play 5-out. That opens the driving lanes. I'm just happy to see real Celtics basketball tonight. I could not be more excited to see what this team does this year.
So that leads me into another question. We're going to hop to the NFL and then back to the NBA in a second. But you mentioned a piece that you wrote for AM New York. I read another piece that you wrote about the Giants' success this season, because JJ covers every sport because he's a man of many trades, if you will. Saquon Barkley. What point do the Giants have to get to in the year where it becomes apparent that Saquon's not coming back next season? Because he's been their entire offense, right? He is all they can do offensively this year, especially with the quarterback situation in New York. What point do the Giants get to as a franchise where they decide we're done with this running back drama, we'll draft one and try to develop another one? How does that end with Saquon in New York?
That's a great question because the way that the Giants are set up right now, I mean, they just paid Daniel Jones all of the money in the world, and he can't run an offense without a star running back. So you need that piece there. So you would trade Saquon in hopes of getting another Saquon. So at that point, it's what's the point of that? And at this point, if you're the Giants, you may just have to sacrifice, that cap space and pay Saquon and just live with the consequences after that. Because I would rather pay Saquon than pay Daniel Jones if you had the choice. Because I feel like Daniel Jones grows on trees. Saquon Barkley does not grow on trees.
That's a great analogy. That's great. I've never heard that before. I like that. All right, back to the NBA. Back to your bread and butter. The James Harden thing. This is new. It came out in the last hour, but we got to get this into the show. So apparently, according to Shams, James Harden shows up at the team facility, I don't know, wherever they're going to get the bus to the plane, with his bags packed, ready to go, ready to get to the new city, get to his hotel room. And someone walks up to him and says, James, we're asking you to not travel with the team anymore. So he has effectively been pushed away from the 76ers, which is just the latest development in this whole saga of him calling Daryl Morey a liar, putting it on champagne bottles at clubs late at night. Where is the James Harden saga, and what do you make of the Sixers not asking him to travel with the team?
I mean, he is the funniest player in the NBA, bar none. It is all-time comedy getting to see what he does in real life. I mean, this feels like a video game. This does not feel like it's real life. This feels like it's on winning time. Like, I can't imagine a winning time on the 76ers team and seeing how James Harden is portrayed. But I mean, they're not a serious team right now. This isn't a serious action by a real title contender. You can't tell me that the Sixers are looking to pursue a title this year while they still have this going on. You can't have one of your two best players just not travel for the road trips and be showing up with his bags packed, being like, "Hey, ready to go, ready to help the team," and they say, "No, thanks, we're all good." So at this point, they're not serious. But I think once they get rid of Harden, depending on the pieces they get back for him, which I don't even know what those pieces are at this point, that's when we can actually evaluate the 76ers team again.
Yeah, they'll get DeLon Wright and a second-round pick. That's going to be the James Harden package at this point. So let me get a bold take out of you. Where do the Sixers end up this year? Do they trade Embiid? They probably don't trade Maxey, right? But where do they end up? Where do you see them finishing when we get to May, June?
I see them they won't have home court advantage in the playoffs. I think you have the Celtics, the Bucks, the Cavs, the Knicks. I see all those four teams finishing above them in the playoffs, at least. And then, there's some other teams on the fringe that could finish above them, but, depending on how scrappy this Nets team is, depending on if they really want to play defense. But I don't see them trading Embiid. Like, they're not going to blow it up. But I think they need to kind of realign and keep their core in place and actually figure out who's going to be on this team if they're going to be a championship contender moving forward.
It's just been the worst kind of storm for Philadelphia, specifically with guards, but just in general, the last, 8 years since the beginning of the Ben Simmons experience, through the James Harden experience to now. My gosh, I feel for Philly fans.
Hate to see stuff like this.
That's JJ Beale. He reports for AM New York Sports. Check out all of his work over there. Follow him on Twitter at JBeale02. Speaking of Philly fans, they had a rough night last night. We'll get into Game 7 and the Arizona Diamondbacks heading to the World Series on the other side. Keep it locked. It's the Sports Wrap. but only Jason's on the West Coast. No one else cares about that.
Yeah, you could say all that again because your mic was muted for a second. Just go ahead.
You could just say, man.
Here, watch this. Watch this. There you go. See? I even started your music again.
Welcome back to the East Coast version of the Sports Wrap on this Wednesday. The Sam Yarnell in for Jason Page. Jason taking his Wednesday day off. Although it's not a day off, the man works 8 days a week. All right, Game 7 in the NLCS last night. Oof. Sorry, Philly. That one was rough. Diamondbacks win it 4-2. We saw Zach Wheeler come out of the bullpen in this game. Ranger Suarez takes the loss. His ERA goes, his postseason ERA, I should say, goes up to 1.93, which is up almost a full run, I believe. I think his ERA was below 1 coming into this game. Credit the Diamondbacks. They played scrappy baseball. They found ways to win. They relied on their bullpen, and their bullpen was something else in this game. Kevin Ginkel, maybe one of, if not the reliever right now in the postseason with the largest cojones, we'll call them for the sake of the show, in Major League Baseball. I'm speaking specifically about when Ginkel and Bryce Harper went head-to-head. I believe there was a runner on first in a 4-2 game, so Harper did represent the tying run. This was, I want to say, the 6th inning, maybe the 7th inning. And Ginkel throws a first pitch, off-speed pitch in the dirt. Harper spits on. But then comes back and throws 2 heaters right down the middle to Bryce Harper in Game 7 of the NLCS when the hitter represented the tying run. The amount of confidence in your stuff that you have to have as a pitcher, the amount of confidence that you have to have over the hitter for the hitter not to do anything with it. And what did Bryce Harper do? He swung and missed at one, and he flew the other into center field. That was kind of the epitome of this series. That at-bat was. Because you had the Diamondbacks make a mistake early, and the Phillies took advantage of it, right? Early in this series, Phillies get out to a lead. Early in this count, Harper gets out to a lead. But then the Diamondbacks come back and say, you know what? We'll just beat you with what we got. We'll beat you with our best stuff. Here it is, hit it, as they say, right? Just like the second 2 pitches of that at-bat. And the Phillies couldn't do anything with it. Game 6 and 7, the big 4 for Philadelphia go 1 for 28. 1 for 28 from Schwarber, Turner, Harper, and Castellanos. That includes offers from the last 3. Really, the one hit came from the least suspecting of the 4. There needs to be reevaluation in Philadelphia. They have a winning ball club. You know, this is a team that is going to lose basically nobody headed into next season. They'll probably lose Rhys Hoskins just because they won't be able to afford to pay him. But they played this whole year without him. He was injured for the season in spring training. The Philadelphia Phillies are not in a bad spot. I don't want anyone to think that that's what I'm out here saying. And as a biased Washington Nationals fan, I'll be the first one to say that, yeah, I don't like Philadelphia. I never have. I grew up in a day watching baseball games where the Philadelphia Phillies were World Series contenders every year, and I would watch them come into Nationals Park, and there would be more Phillies fans than Nats fans, and Ryan Howard, Chase Utley, and Jimmy Rollins would combine for about 17 total bases in a 3-game series. That said, the Phillies are not in a bad spot at all. Bryce Harper, while there needs to be a serious conversation had about his clutch factor, and I said this when the narrative was constructed this postseason, and I'll say it again now. I don't understand why we will ever refer to him as a clutch baseball player. He's not. When the lights shine the brightest, he shrivels back up into his shell. He did it in Washington. He's done it in Philadelphia. That said, he's a great baseball player. He's a generational talent. Question needs to be asked is, where is Bryce Harper in his career now? You know, he's crossed the 30-year-old threshold. We'll see about that. I don't think with the injury history of Bryce Harper, I think a lot of people, even Philly fans, will agree with me that he's not quite the type to play until he's 40. So questions will come. This is a guy who's been in Major League Baseball for 12 years now. Let's not forget that. Kyle Schwarber's not a spring chicken either, but the dude seems to never age a day. Seems like his hitting ability right now and his speed and his tangible physical elements are all the exact same that they were when he was an electric rookie coming out of Indiana, rocketing his way through the Cubs system as a 5-tool player. Now, the defense maybe isn't all there, but in a day and age where we have the universal designated hitter, which should be banned universally, in my opinion, but that's another conversation for a different day. In a day and age of the universal designated hitter, Kyle Schwarber becomes infinitely more valuable, being able to hide his defensive lack of ability. So there's a lot to look forward to if you're a Philadelphia Phillies fan. And I think, as evidenced by last year, this is a team that'll be back there for years to come. And they're in the best division in baseball when you look at the Braves and the Mets. Sorry, Nats. You're not there yet. The Philadelphia Phillies will be fine. No one worry. I get it's a sad season, but Philly fans still have the Eagles, who will wait until the Super Bowl to let them down again. So you're good until February, Philadelphia. You're good until February. Now the Diamondbacks. How about this electric factory? Jason and I both said yesterday on the show that we thought they were going to win the game, and it's because they're a scrappy baseball team. They find ways to win. I said it at the top of the segment. And in 2023, this series almost embodied why that's important perfectly. You've got the Philadelphia Phillies who, on paper, by all the computer metrics, this should have been a gentleman's sweep. This should have been a real sweep even. The Diamondbacks shouldn't have had a chance in this game. A team that lost over 100 games a year ago. By the way, we had 3 teams that lost over 100 games last season make the division series or later. That's incredible. And there's another point I'll get to at the end of this segment on why all of this is really good for baseball. But the Arizona Diamondbacks have kind of joined the Baltimore Orioles as the blueprint for what can happen when everything goes right. They sold everything. They were horrible for 4 years. 4 years of just terrible baseball. And what did it turn into? It turned into getting Zach Gallen from the Marlins. It turned into developing Brandon Pfaadt. It turned into redeveloping Merrill Kelly. They had to punt on Madison Bumgarner to get here. Let's not forget that, folks. They punted on Madison Bumgarner in April or May. Madison Bumgarner was on this team this year, and if they win the World Series, he will get a World Series ring again. Number 4 in his collection, I believe. The Diamondbacks need to be revered. They are, in a time where baseball has become so nuanced and similar, they're a sore thumb that sticks out like nobody's business, and they're great at it. And it starts with their manager, Torey Lovullo, right? He is the perfect kind of manager to manage one of these teams, to manage a team that has no expectations, that's expected to lose 80, 90 games, that if they go 500, hey, That's a great season for them, and now they're in the World Series. But Torey Lovullo is a piss and vinegar kind of manager. He knows that, the only thing you can use that outside noise for is motivation, and that was embodied perfectly in his exchange with Chris Mad Dog Russo. So Russo is a guy who, since the Diamondbacks were in the wild card game against or the wild card series it is now, against Milwaukee, Russo was saying no one believed in the Diamondbacks, all this kind of stuff. Then he said this past week last week, that he would retire if the Diamondbacks won. Obviously, everyone's seen this. It's become one of the more viral things. But the way Torey Lovullo handled it in a press conference was masterful. He said exactly what we know all the managers always think, all coaches, when it comes to this social media hoopla. And that's that you can't do anything besides use it for motivation. People are going to see it. It's going to have some sort of effect on your team. So the best thing that you can do is use it to affect your team positively, no matter what it is. And that's exactly what he did, and that's exactly what the Diamondbacks did. And at the end of the night last night, as the Philly fans were there still booing half an hour after the game ended, still throwing trash on the field after the game ended, which as an ode to Philadelphia, they were doing almost. But they were still there as the D-backs were celebrating their National League championship. It's the first World Series appearance for the Diamondbacks since 2001. How incredible is that? It's good for small market baseball to be back on the largest stage. Now, in 2001, I don't think the D-backs were very small market. They had one of the best pitchers of all time on their roster, and they were going up against a New York juggernaut that is one Mariano Rivera blown save away from 28. To my other point about why this is good for baseball, and shout out to Mark Zuckerman, who I believe writes for Masson, tweeted this last night. We will now have 9 different World Series champions in 10 years. That is good for baseball. We've gotten away from the ways of the 90s and the 2000s where you have 5 or 7 teams that compete for it for a 15, 20-year stretch. This is the best thing that baseball could do because it's taking young kids or just generally people from markets in places like Phoenix, Arizona, and putting their teams on the biggest stage. It makes people fall in love with these teams. Baseball is in a very good spot right now. We talk about this all season long with the rule changes, the pizza boxes, the pitch clock, ghost runner on second, so on and so on. But at the end of the day, what's growing the game more than any of that is the fact that you're taking the biggest spectacle to the smaller teams. When the Nationals were in the World Series, it was a different kind of energy around Washington. I imagine the same will be the case with Arizona and Phoenix. And it turns into more of the city that it was when the Super Bowl was there 8 months ago. Baseball's in a very good spot. Same with the Rangers. Rangers are another not huge market team, Arlington, Texas. It's almost like these two small market teams fighting for a World Series are kind of signifying a turning point in baseball. And we knew this would be a turning point coming into the season with the new rules, as I just alluded to, and so on and so forth. But the tides have turned towards the smaller market teams when you think about the macro moves that MLB has made over the last 10 years. The introduction of the luxury tax, the expansion of the wild card. MLB is catering more towards these small market teams, and it's working. We've got 2 of them in the World Series. And while Joe Schmo, who watches mostly football and is, Yankees, Jets, Yankees, Jets, whatever, Islanders fan, he's not going to be happy that the Yankees aren't playing in it, and he'll probably be watching Zach Wilson start or Casey Cizikas lose 40 games for his team this season. This is good for baseball. Baseball fans are going to be watching this World Series, and it's going to be pulling from a pool that it didn't even know it had in these small markets. I'm so excited to see where Major League Baseball goes because of this, and I'm even more excited to see what the numbers are on next year's World Series when they come out. They should come out during this year's World Series, but that's my spiel on Major League Baseball. I think that they're in such a beneficial spot with this World Series rather than a Phillies-Rangers World Series or a Phillies-Astros World Series. Expanding into the smaller markets is something that will grow the game exponentially compared to expansion in larger markets. All right, on the other side, we got lots more on the Sports Wrap to cover. Lots of news out of the NFL, including Jim Irsay. What are you doing? Going on Twitter, talking about his interaction with the NFL. It probably broke some rules. We'll get more into it on the other side. Come on back. It's the Sports Wrap.
One to start in this one. Fake the hand on first down. Intercepted! Jabril Peppers
Video went viral yesterday of the Chris Olave arrest. I'm sure everyone heard about. He's speeding down a residential street. He was going 70 in a 35. And he got pulled over by a cop. Now, the body cam footage came out, and there's a quote where Olave says to the officer while being arrested and walking over to the police car, he says, "My bad, man. I play for the Saints." And the police officer's response, and I'm quoting here, is, "And?" Which was just hilarious to me. Objectively hilarious. Somebody using or trying to use their privilege and just being vehemently denied at the first possible second. Beyond that, there was another video that came out. I believe it was of a Saints lineman who was mic'd up this week, something of that effect. Someone in the offense who was mic'd up this week. Now, in that video, on the play that everyone saw on Thursday, was it Thursday night when the Saints played? I believe it was. Everyone saw the play where Chris Olave ran the wrong route. Derek Carr threw a bad ball, and Derek Carr comes down the field after the play, seemingly yelling at somebody. So the hot mic in this mic'd up video picks up what Derek Carr is yelling, and he's yelling at Chris Olave for not running the right route. Now, all of this stuff around Chris Olave right now has to lead us to the question: is Chris Olave a problematic wide receiver in the NFL? He's great. He's very talented. Very, very talented. I have him on 2 of my fantasy teams. But is he problematic in the locker room? I mean, the guy was going twice the speed limit on a residential street, and he's running the wrong routes in a game, in a primetime game. I think there needs to be a book opened, just not necessarily written. We don't need to write the whole story, but let's just open it and get our pen ready, because I think the Chris Olave situation may be heading south. I think Chris Olave may become problematic, and that is the last thing the Saints need right now. Jason and I talked early in the week about how the Saints are by far the most screwed team in the NFL when you look at talent on the roster right now, how many wins they could possibly have, division strength, and their situation roster and cap-wise for the next 5 years. If Chris Olave turns out to be problematic to the point that the Saints have to get rid of him, my gosh, that is going to be a fresh hell that they have not yet even known existed. That's really all I got on the Chris Olave thing. Chris Olave has so much potential. The Saints got to get something going with him, because if he turns problematic with the amount of physical ability that receiver has and the amount that he's shown in a year and a half that he can be proficient in that offense, it's going to be an interesting situation down in New Orleans. All right. The big story, the Jim Irsay tweet. All right, let's get into this. So yesterday, or it may have even been, it was this morning. Excuse me. I take that back. It was last night. If I can get my timeline right, that'd be nice. Irsay tweets this: urgent NFL/Colts news. Remember, this is coming from Jim Irsay's personal Twitter account. It's not the Colts account. It is Jim Irsay's personal Twitter account. The first bullet point, by the way, these bullet points are marked with football emojis. Awesome. The first bullet point is about Anthony Richardson surgery going well in LA. No date for him to return, whatever. The second one is the one that may have gotten him in trouble. And I'm going to read it here so I don't get the quote wrong. Football emoji. The NFL admits and understands that they did not make the correct calls at the end of Sunday's Colts-Browns game. I believe we need to institute instant replay for all calls, including penalties, in the last 2 minutes of all games. Now, Tom Pelissero 13 minutes later, tweets, the NFL communicates with teams on a weekly basis about various calls. Team officials are prohibited from commenting publicly on those discussions. Now, a team owner has publicly said the league admitted to officiating mistakes. Stay tuned. Folks, this is about as Jim Irsay as it gets. I mean, he couldn't fly the whale across the country, so instead, he's going to make himself back in the news. He's going to put himself back in the news cycle by literally breaking the rules of the organization that he is one of the board members of. I don't understand it. I don't get it. From a couple of angles. If you're Jim Irsay, you don't need to tell people that, because as we all know, being NFL fans, we are the first to justify our teams losing with officiating performances. So Irsay going back after the fact 2 days later and saying, oh yeah, by the way, they thought that too. All that's going to do is add fuel to the fire rather than maintain the status quo, which has been what we've done for umpteen dozen years in the NFL when we have problems with officiating. Second, if you're the NFL, why on earth are you going around to owners on Mondays and Tuesdays and saying, oh yeah, this is what we got wrong? I have not looked in enough to what the union situation is like for NFL officials versus Major League Baseball umpires. But I know that this is a contentious point when it comes to baseball, so that's where I will draw comparisons from. In baseball, you have about a 15-minute window after the game to ask the umpires any questions, and that 15-minute window is conducted by one reporter. It's called a pool reporter, and they go and they talk to the umpire, and they get very bland explanations every single time, even in the most complicated, highest stakes games. That is all orchestrated by the Major League Baseball Umpires Association, the union for Major League Baseball umpires. Do NFL officials not have the same thing? And if so, how has that not come about in the NFL, a league where officials are way more under the microscope, penalties are reviewed at a far higher rate? I shouldn't say penalties, plays are reviewed at a far higher rate. Think about it. There are twice as many challenges in football games as there are in baseball games. I don't understand the logic here from either side. The NFL has to do something about communication with teams with regard to officiating, and if that something is communicate with them less, so be it. But you've got to avoid situations like this, because now you've got Colts fans enraged, you've got football fans enraged, you've got a bad look publicly for the league and its officials. Nothing that is good is going to come out of this situation between Irsay and the Colts. And I think that he probably knew that when he tweeted this all out, but he wanted to stay in the news cycle and he wanted to continue to stir the pot. So Jim Irsay, always gonna Jim Irsay. That's all I can say, really. All right, last piece on the NFL here. This is a wild one. And I know 5 seconds into this story, you're going to be like, Sam, why are you talking about this? The Rams released their kicker, Brett Maher. Go ahead, turn off the podcast. Why is this important? Who is Brett Maher? You've probably never even heard of him. Well, unless you play fantasy football in a league where they still have kickers. Brett Maher is the number 4 fantasy kicker right now. Brett Maher was 4 for 4 on field goals last week. Brett Maher is currently unemployed. Listen, we could get into the nuts and bolts about NFL contracts and NFL rosters and how turnover is sometimes unjustified. I don't care about that. Get rid of kickers in your fantasy football leagues, people. I don't know why on earth we are still playing in a world where kicking is a fantasy football position. All it does is screw people over and show you how teams can win fantasy football games without actually knowing anything about football. To the Brett Maher owners out there, I'm sorry. To the commissioners of leagues where kickers are still allowed in fantasy football, figure it out. Change it. Because there's no good reason in the year 2023, when there are two good fantasy kickers, those being Justin Tucker and Tyler Bass, there are two. Get rid of kickers in your fantasy leagues in 2023. I don't understand why we still have them. It's more pointless than having a defense on your team. Get rid of the kickers. All right, we'll come back in just a minute, wrap things up really quickly. Just a quick story I wanted to get to about the NHL. Really interesting happenings last night. Second time ever the NHL's had 16 games in a day. We'll get into it next on the Sports Wrap. On this Wednesday, October 25th. Sam Yarnell in for Jason Page. Jason's back tomorrow.
Maybe.
But if you like... Maybe, right. If you like the Just Me version, tune in every Wednesday. If you hate the Just Me version, tune in every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. All right, let's wrap things up. Talk a little NHL, because I know Jason hates it when I talk about hockey, so I throw it in at the end of the show every time. Last night, for the first time, we had the Frozen Frenzy on ESPN+. 16 games on the same night for the second time ever. Second time in NHL history, there have been 16 games on the same day. It was a red zone style way to watch the games. It was very interesting. So the first goal, so the game started yesterday at 6 Eastern, and I believe the last puck drop was either 10 or 10:30 Eastern. First goal was scored at 6:40. Last goal was scored at 6:40 p.m. Last goal was scored at 1:45 a.m. There were never more than 10 minutes without a goal throughout the entire broadcast, never more than 10 minutes without a goal. It was the 800 goal day in NHL history, so lots of goals to go around. But it was an awesome experience. I found myself tuning into it for not the entire thing, admittedly. I'm not that big of a hockey fan, and we had a Game 7 in baseball last night. But I did find myself tuning into it from time to time, and it was super enjoyable. Shout out to John Butchergross for doing a great job in terms of like playing the Chris Hansen role and moving from game to game and understanding where the producers were going, because I can only imagine how hard that is.
You said Chris Hansen. You meant Scott Hansen. Chris Hansen was the guy that used to catch a predator. I had to stop you because all I could think about is Chris Hansen going, well, maybe you were expecting to meet me. Carry on.
Right. Scott Hansen. Andrew Siciliano. Well, we'll just cut the Hansen family out of it. And he was doing his Andrew Siciliano last night. Anyway, it was awesome. I loved watching it. It was really cool. I hope they do it again. I think it'd be a really cool thing for the NHL. I think it'd be a really cool thing for lots of leagues. This is something I've been saying for years. Baseball needs to have this. This is how you grow baseball. Baseball, more so than football, let alone hockey, is a sport that is made to be watched this way, is a sport where you have short plays and lots of time in between to look at other plays. This is almost too easy to me that they should be doing something like this with baseball. But regardless, I enjoyed it with hockey last night, and I will do it as in I will watch it again. Whenever they put it on. I thought that it was very cool.
I've been wrong in Arizona.
Easy to keep track of bets, so on and so forth. I was very happy with the product. The Frozen Frenzy was very cool. Another story that I wanted to wrap up with out of the NHL, they've walked back their stick tape ban. So yesterday we got word that the NHL will allow players in both practices, warm-ups, and games to use any sort of stick tape, any tape on the end of their stick that they want to demonstrate cause, right? This has gone viral over the last handful of years, I feel like, at this point, with the Pride Nights, and every NHL team does a Pride Night, and their entire team comes out in rainbow warm-up jerseys, and they all put rainbow tape on their sticks, so on and so forth. Coming into this NHL season, the league said that they were outlawing it and that players weren't allowed to, in warm-ups or practice or during the game, use any stick tape outside of these regulated ones, which the rainbow did fall under. On Saturday, Travis Dermott, I think it's Dermott, it may be Dermott, used rainbow-colored tape on his stick while the ban was still in effect. So this ban wasn't lifted until yesterday, right? And on Saturday, Travis Dermott goes into this game and uses his stick fully taped up like that. No one, obviously, he wasn't assessed a penalty on the ice, but it would be on the league to fine him after the game, after the fact. Now, I would just like to say credit to Travis Dermott for calling the hand of the NHL. Because really, what were they going to do when he did that? Were they going to say, no, we're going to fine you for advocating for LGBTQIA rights in the United States of America? That would be a horrible look for the league. An even worse look for a league that's based in Canada, a country where these kinds of things are just as big of a problem. Good on the NHL for walking it back the way they did, but the means to the end were not correct. Travis Dermott never should have had to do what he did, and the NHL never should have put that ban in place to begin with. It was foolish. It was catering to a very, very small faction of hockey fans. A loud faction, sure, but a very small one. I'm happy that this has all been worked out and that players will be able to express themselves freely. But like I said, the means were not the correct ones to the end. That's going to do it for the Sports Wrap on this Wednesday, October 25th. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Just search the Sports Wrap with Jason Page. Like, comment, subscribe, retweet, follow Jason at the back page on X and all the other social medias. Follow me at Sam_Yarnell on X, and that's the only social media I use. So there. How about that? Jason's back tomorrow. That'll do it for Wednesday. We'll talk to you real soon on the Sports Wrap.